on the note of BioWare, one of the other concerns, or I could even maybe say hopes, is that BioWare gets sold to another company. I think that, again...
a big Sony daddy comes in and gobbles it up, right? Or Microsoft or some other large publisher, like enormous publisher with many verticals, comes and just gobbles up a BioWare when it goes up for sale, if it goes up for sale.
Yeah. Well, I think that the main issues with that you kind of illustrated is there's only so many people that could afford to do that. You mentioned some of them. Some other, Tencent could certainly hope to do it. If we look at a lot of these, though, not only has BioWare not been a good steward of their own IPs, but a lot of the big places that could buy BioWare haven't been great. Microsoft's been laying people off. They've been doing some weird ass, who knows what the fuck their plan is for a while. Sony failed, or has been failing, to kind of own Bungie in any kind of a solid way. Now, I guess you could argue that Bungie leadership didn't make that easy for them because of some of the drama with like people leaving and just trying to get a bag. But like BioWare's not really maybe worth all the money that they'd have to spend to get it. And also, even more importantly than that, if you look at historically when entire IPs or studios are purchased, most of the time, it tends to be, at least based on the research that we did, it tends to be the result of some kind of bankruptcy auction. The big examples that I was able to find kind of in recent history was the purchase of a bunch of IPs from Midway Games by Warner Brothers. Specifically in 2009, they picked up Mortal Kombat, Spy Hunter, and Joust. I don't know Spy Hunter or Joust. I'm sorry if anyone's a big fan.
Everyone knows Joust. It's the old arcade.
I did not. I've never played it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And then the other big one was when THQ went bankrupt. There was an asset sale in, I believe it was 2013. Relic was sold to Sega. They, of course, make Company of Heroes, Warhammer 40K, Dawn of War. I should have said Dawn of War. Evolve got purchased by Take-Two, which is fucking wild, knowing where Evolve is now. Homefront got bought by Crytek. Homefront is not a good IP. I don't know why they bought it, but whatever. And then South Park got bought by Ubisoft. Or Stick of Truth.
Well, they made Homefront the Revolution, which is a very, very flawed game.
Yeah, they're all so bad. Homefront, spending any money on that, honestly, it's not, they should not have had to, they should have been paid to buy Homefront. That IP is ass, dude. Anyway, sorry. And then, of course, Gears of War is 2014. Gears of War got sold from Epic to Microsoft. That was not part of a bankruptcy action. Apparently, it was more of there's some articles that suggest Epic didn't know what to do with the Gears of War franchise moving forward, and they just needed some money to reinvest into the engine and other projects. This is before Fortnite. And then the most recent is that Hi-Fi Rush, Tango Gameworks, was acquired by Krafton after Xbox shuttered the studio. And that was in 2024. So my point of bringing all this up as quickly as I could was to say, I do not believe that any IP will be getting sold by EA. I could be wrong. Maybe I will need to eat my words, but I don't think that they're going to want to do it. Most of these companies, they'll shut down the studio and sit on the IP. That's what they did with Dead Space, as an example, historically. I'm trying to even think what other IPs are out there that I wish... I mean, I never really played Beyond Good and Evil, but like Ubisoft's been sitting on that motherfucker for a few reasons.
In pure theory, they've been working on a second game for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. I mean, like, if that game ever comes out, it's going to be such a righteous train wreck. I doubt it'll ever see the day of light, but... well, I mean, actually, I think a bigger one for Ubisoft right now would be Splinter Cell, which they've just done shit with in the game space.
True.
Despite it being, I mean, they just released it was a new Netflix show that came out. But they've been incapable of generating a Splinter Cell game.
Ghost Recon hasn't had a new game in a hot minute too. I mean, not as long as Splinter Cell, but.
And I think was it Breakpoint was the most recent one there, and that had a whole bunch of the fuckery going on behind the scenes as well.
I believe so, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, most of the time when these IPs kind of fall out of the limelight, they just end up getting, you're completely right, they just end up getting sat on by their parent companies. And I think the narrative that lends itself to the idea that EA would be looking to offload some of these IPs or some of the studios that make those IPs is because, staffing people to make games that you're not sure are going to perform is expensive. And new EA is saddled with $20 billion of debt. Maybe they could make a quick buck selling BioWare to Sony, which, very minor, very, very, very minor side tangent. At the very least, I will say that Sony has been a much stronger steward of IPs in the single player narrative space than they have the live service space. Most of their recent foibles have come with their ambitions for live service, right? Shuttered studios, canceled projects, the entire Bungie affair, the entire Concord affair, those are all big, massive, high-profile failures in the live service space, but their single-player games are still actually performing reasonably well. All the Marvel's games are absolutely crushing it in terms of sales numbers and also record-breaking budgets. The new Ghost game came out, and it's selling every bit as well as as Ghost of Tsushima did, despite having a smaller console install base. So there's potential there that if EA was looking to make a bit of quick money in order to offset some of their debt, that, some studios might theoretically be interested in buying some of these larger IPs. The question there is again multifaceted. One, are any bigger studios interested in buying a potential headache? If so, would they be doing so at a reasonably reduced cost, almost such to the point that it would not offset nearly enough of EA's $20 billion debt to make it even worth their while, when they could instead just close it down and call it a day, or put whatever money it is they need to in order to buy the social angle of things. I think, I don't know, I think it's kind of unlikely that we'll see, because I've heard it floated even that the entire, because EA is currently structured in two separate divisions. There's the entertainment division, which focuses on your Star Warses and your BioWare properties and things like that. And then you have the sports division. And it's been floated that this purchase may be in the first wave of multiple deals, which may include the consortium selling off the entire entertainment wing in order to offset some of this this $20 billion in debt, which I think is completely unlikely. I think it's pretty darn unlikely. Unless their only goal is to get Saudi Arabia's name out there in terms of sports and esports, I doubt very much that is likely, just because when you have the strength of something like the Star Wars IP, you're probably not going to want to separate yourself from that completely.
I mean, it's also that, and there's like Battlefield. There's a lot of things. I think that the way that the game industry works in terms of like consumers is that a lot of people play sports games that would not identify as someone that plays a lot of video games. So if you kind of want cultural relevance in games, you need to do more than just sports. Like, it's true that like those have the biggest reach. I play them on occasion, but most of my friends, the vast majority of people that I play games with, do not play sports games. And so if you're trying to launder your image at a larger scale throughout all of games and you're trying to build up a games industry, it would be weird to get rid of some of the big IPs that you have, namely at this point, Titanfall, Battlefield, the pretty successful Star Wars single-player games that have been coming out, and
The Sims.
The Sims, yeah. I always forget about The Sims. The Sims,
I
there's
forget about
always
The
stuff
Sims too.
going on with The Sims, but I always forget about it because I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I mean, those are, and they're so diverse in terms of the markets that they play in, that you are looking at cultural saturation beyond, like, cross-generational cultural saturation beyond the sports crowd and beyond the shooter crowd. So yeah, I think that a whole, like, package deal sale is completely untenable and kind of counterintuitive to the goal, as we believe it to be. Which does leave that sort of piecemeal sale of individual intellectual properties or studios. Which, yeah, Zach, I hate to say it, I do kind of agree with you, because in many ways, I think it's wishful thinking in a lot of ways, because, you know, a lot of the time, the worst stuff that happens to EA games is kind of the fault of EA. Again, BioWare being a good example of that. Veilguard, not to say that it would have been an incredible game necessarily simply by virtue of not having been meddled with, but it was started, stopped, rebooted, flipped, pivoted, and fixed 15 goddamn times before it landed on its final iteration. If that had not been a thing that was done to BioWare by old EA, there's every bit, you know, every chance that the game could have come out and been a series highlight. You know, so it's natural, I think, to want that sort of IP to be freed from the umbrella of EA, both old and new. But yeah, logistically, it seems unlikely to me.
Yeah, I just would say... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, not that I wouldn't be interested to see what that would look like. It just seems unlikely.
I would be more interested if smaller entities were able to buy up some of these games. I think that would truly be the best thing, because it would lead to a lack of consolidation. Truthfully, we don't benefit from EA selling any of their big IPs to other big publishers, which are then just going to further consolidate. Like Microsoft gaining Battlefield, these Star Wars games that have been coming out, Titanfall, we don't benefit from that. Sony getting those, we don't really benefit from that. It's more corporate consolidation. It's not great. The best thing would be if somehow all of this got sold to smaller entities, which isn't going to happen, but that would be super dope. I will say, real quick, that I think another reason these probably won't get sold is because when you're talking about the value of an IP, right? An IP can exist without the studio. They can destroy BioWare and still maintain Mass Effect and Dragon Age. And what can they do with that? They can license it out for TV shows, for animated TV shows, for Netflix, right? They can license it out for other video games. They can do so much stuff. So they could just decide, oh, these are really popular, like, cultural games. We don't want to run the game, but we do want to be the steward of the IP in the sense of delegating who can and can't make games for Dragon Age and Mass Effect. And that might be more lucrative for them than having a studio that has to make the games themselves. So when you're talking about like the value and the price of an IP, not the price, more the value, there's more to consider than just the studio and the cost of running the studio. Right? It might just be cheaper to hold IP and then license it out for ridiculous sums of money. Like, think about how many people would want to make a Dragon Age game, or how many people, more specifically, how many people would want to make a Mass Effect game or movie or TV show or whatever, right?
Well, it's already happening.
Well, yeah, and I was about to say that. But yeah, I don't know. The sad thing is, even if they like the IP, that does not save BioWare. The IP... is not the same as the studio.
Yeah, I mean that's we've seen that with Halo, we've seen that with, you know, a billion different things, where the studio that creates a beloved IP becomes disenfranchised, right? They become separate from the thing that they created. So yeah, you're completely right. And in many cases, I think that the sort of cultural awareness of a lot of these IPs is inherently more valuable than the games that are being made using the IP. I think that's almost certainly true at this point of something like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, where the potential for that world to become untethered from games and the turbulent cycle of development that has been going on at BioWare for the last decade plus. Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely see that being seen as of considerable value, much more so than, just offloading the entire thing or opening it up for sale. So yeah, I think we're probably in for some more EA tomfoolery, insofar as all of these IPs go. I don't know, did you have any more huge points to bring up before we do closing thoughts?
No, my closing thing on this is that I was just going to say I could easily, in the BioWare discussion, if we're going to say something gets sold, I could see them selling Dragon Age. I think Dragon Age has had a rougher time really getting cultural relevance in comparison to Mass Effect. And I love Dragon Age. But of the two, it is the weaker IP, certainly. Just because, it just has not... The first game was so good, and then it just hasn't had kind of the exponential success that Mass Effect had from 1 to 3. It never reached that peak. So that was the last thing I was going to say, is if we're talking about BioWare, I don't see a world where they give up Mass Effect. I could maybe see a world where they don't value Dragon Age, but I don't know, it's not like it's a poopy IP per se, so.
No, it's just a very uneven IP. Again, the first game came out and it was absolutely phenomenal. The second one was rushed out the door. Still a lot to like in it, but it's not as strong. Inquisition did killer numbers and got great reviews. I have my gripes with Inquisition that I'll save for a previous episode where I've already talked about some of them. And I can absolutely see what you're talking about. I think Mass Effect as a broader IP is less tarnished in the public view. It's also a lot more focused. Its sales pitch is a lot easier, and it's more immediately understandable to a wide audience than Dragon Age, which is very mired in its, politics, and, it's another fantasy world with a couple of interesting pivots, but sci-fi in the theaters, I think, is doing right now a little bit better than fantasy is. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with either of those. They'll probably just sit on Dragon Age, honestly. After Veilguard, I would be astonished if BioWare gets the ability to make Mass Effect 5, then that could completely change the course of their future. Right. The idea that BioWare makes Mass Effect 5 and it's great means that they have secured their place. The IP will by that point have a new TV show. It'll be a cross medium sensation, and everyone's crazy about Mass Effect. Or they release it and it's not very good, and also the show on Amazon Prime that's coming out sort of either does great or underperforms. Either way, it could result in the studio itself being closed and the show continuing to be made, or it could result in the show only getting one season and the studio being closed. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of different ways that specifically that could go. But yeah, I think if any more Dragon Age is going to get made, it will be on the back of a successful Mass Effect 5.